Hello and welcome to the West Asia Post, our weekly show where we bring you a roundup of all the recent updates, developments and news from one of the world's most volatile regions. This week I am your host and I am Ghadi Francis. Before we dive into the edition of the West Asia Post, let's take a look at what's making the headlines across the region.
Leaders of Arab League member states arrive in Jeddah for the high-stakes annual summit. The meet has been overshadowed by Syria's re-entry to the bloc after over a decade. Amnesty International releases its report on state executions carried out in 2022. It says Iran and Saudi Arabia drive the spike in record punishment figures. The United Nations and Washington condemn anti-Arab chants made during the annual flag march in Jerusalem's Old City. And Lebanon receives an Interpol notice requesting the arrest of central bank chief Riyad Salameh after a French judge issued a warrant against him over a graft scandal.
It is official. Syria is back from the cold. The Arab world is embracing it, and all eyes are now on President Bashar al-Assad as he sits at the table of a very crucial Arab League in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. So, how will this be interpreted? What will happen next to the war-torn country? In the next report, we bring you more about the story we have been tracking in the West Asia Post. Let's talk about Syria.
After 13 long years in the cold, Syrian President Bashar al-Assad has touched down in Saudi Arabia, symbolizing a return for the once labelled pariah. Assad arrived in Jeddah on Thursday, where he'll be taking part in the Arab League Summit.
When we talk about a joint Arab action and we are at a summit, we need a common awareness to build this Arab action.
Apart from Assad, Syria's re-entry to the bloc marks a big victory for Saudi Arabia's crown prince and de facto leader, Mohammed bin Salman. For the last few months, Riyadh has been exercising a foreign policy free from Washington's control, and Syria's re-entry to the bloc, despite US reservations, is a milestone. Over a decade ago, Saudi Arabia was the spearhead of opposition to Assad. Led by Saudi Arabia, Syria was shunned by fellow regional leaders after the Assad government's deadly crackdown on protests.
In view of the Syrian government's failure to carry out in its entirety and immediately the Arab League's initiative that was signed at the foreign ministerial level meeting on the 2nd of November 2011, we announced the suspension of the participation of the Syrian delegation in meetings of the Arab League Council and all of the agencies associated as of November 16th.
With this, Syria was out of the Arab League. Assad left alone in the region, with no country but Iran standing by it. Qatar and Kuwait are still not in favor of Syria's readmission. Unlike Saudi, Qatar, Kuwait and Morocco have not renormalized relations with Damascus. They maintain that al-Assad's government is illegitimate.
Regarding the state of Qatar, I have made its position clear in different forums. There were reasons for the suspension of Syria from the Arab League and the boycott of the Syrian regime at this time, and these reasons still exist, at least for us, the state of Qatar.
But leading the bloc, Riyadh used its influence as a leader in the Arab and Islamic world to persuade them to not obstruct Syria's return to the Arab League.
The return of Syria is the beginning of a movement, not an end. The direction of the resolution to the crisis in Syria will take time for procedures to be implemented, and it will be gradual. The task of this committee is to follow up on those procedures. Also, it is not a decision to resume relationships between Arab states and Syria. This is a sovereign decision left for every country to take on its own. In this decision, we are talking about holding the membership and the formation of a committee to communicate with the Syrian government and regime.
For regional leaders, pragmatism is the key. Re-engaging with Syria to achieve their national and regional interests is much more important than following the unsustainable Western strategy of isolating Syria. For them, the focus is on mitigating the conflict, on clamping down on captive networks, reversing drug trade, and solving the refugee crisis. What does Syria have to gain from its re-entry? Quite a lot. Assad sees normalization of ties with the Arab states and specifically the region's economic powerhouse Saudi Arabia as a critical source of potential funding. Observers comment what Assad needs is money, and he'll take it from all parties that offer it, be it Iran, Russia or Saudi Arabia.
So whoever won the Turkish polls? No one yet. Well, the Turkish polls have ended inconclusively, and now the next step is a runoff. As Turkish people prep for the next runoff of the elections, a big question now arises once again. Will the runoff up President Erdogan's scale, or will it end his term in the top office? We tell you more.
Touted as the most important election of 2023. Branded a litmus test for strongman Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Turkey's knife-edge electoral contest has entered round 2 after no candidate was able to win majority support. The much-awaited Turkish presidential poll took place on the 14th of May, and its follow-up, the runoff, will be held on May 28th. The contest is now narrowed down to 2 people. On the one side is Erdogan, the AK party's chief, a proven orator, a passionate campaigner, a president who has governed for 2 decades now. And on the other hand is Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, known as Turkey's Ghadi, the face of the united opposition, the leader of the Republican People's Party, a politician with no big wins in his kitty. Round 1 results ended like this. Erdogan missed the mark narrowly with 49.5% of votes, while Kılıçdaroğlu got 44.9% of the votes. Now, with a fresh vote in under 2 weeks' time, both candidates remain defiant.
I am here. I am here. You are also here with me. I swear that I will fight until the very end. I am here.
The results of the May 14 election were in contrast to most opinion polls. They suggested a win for the opposition and a near loss for Erdogan. Analysts said that a failing economy, devastating earthquake and crackdown on free speech would finally catch up with Erdogan. But that possibility seems remote now.
For the second round of the presidential elections, Mr. Erdogan has a great advantage. Not only he is very close to the 50% threshold, but the fact that his alliance got the majority in the parliament gives him some very strong arguments towards winning the second round. So it seems like 2 weeks from now we will have more of the same of what we had in Turkey.
It all depends on who polls the final 5%. This man, Sinan Oğan, has become the unexpected kingmaker. He decides which way the 5% deciding votes go. This is the 5% votes he received in the first round. 2.8 million people voted in his favor. With Oğan out, his supporters will have to choose between Erdogan and Turkish Ghadi in round 2, or opt for not voting at all. Oğan was once associated with the Nationalist Movement Party, which happens to be the ally of Erdogan's AK party. Oğan was expelled from the party in 2015. Why? Internal rift. This man likes to call himself the candidate for Turkish nationalism. Now is his time to bargain and play his cards right.
If we decide to be with an alliance, a protocol will be signed with them, and we put in words that no concessions will be made regarding the pro-Kurdish People's Democratic Party. We have certain red lines, such as fighting against terrorism and sending refugees back. We have voiced these conditions before.
Turkey's presidential polls are being closely watched by the West. The reason? Turkey's strategic position on the world map and Erdogan's bonhomie with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Russia has said that it will cooperate with whoever takes the top office. While Russia seems fine with whoever scores this poll, Europe has a lot to consider. Whatever the outcome, Turkey's European neighbours will use the election and its aftermath to assess their relationship with Ankara and the degree to which it can be reset.
There is a new worry for the West, and it is the Russian-Iranian bilateral ties. These ties are really growing and becoming stronger. In the latest, the nations announced that they will have a plan about a joint rail soon. The rail is to be a rival of the Suez Canal. More about this in the coming report.
This partnership of convenience might turn out to be a headache for the West. Russia and Iran have announced a new deal. It has a clear aim: to present an alternative to one of the busiest waterways, the Suez Canal. This Wednesday, the two allies agreed to collaborate on the construction of the final part of a commercial transport network. It links the Gulf to India while avoiding Western sea lanes.
The good transfer via the new corridor will have significant competitive advantages. For example, the goods delivery from St. Petersburg to, let's say, Mumbai will take about 10 days. In comparison, the delivery through traditional ways will take about 45 days.
The construction of a 162-kilometer long railway between the Iranian cities of Rasht and Astara will take 3 years to complete. Once done, it will ensure direct and seamless connections along the international north-south transport corridor. The network provides global access to markets connecting India, Iran, Azerbaijan, Russia and Central Asia. A corridor that Russia says can rival the Suez Canal as a major world trade route. The two countries taking on the project are under Western sanctions. It is also the common factor bringing them together. The two investors have called the rail deal a big economic win that will boost regional trade, bring in new jobs and attract investment. Both embattled and isolated by the West, Russia and Iran have always had a partnership of convenience. One marred with undercurrents of mistrust and wariness. But in recent times, Tehran's ruling elite have embraced the newfound alliance. They believe it's better to place their fate in Russia's hands than look towards the West again. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Next is a story from the country I'm currently in. A country that is reeling from an economic and political crisis. The currency is tanking. People have lost faith in the banking system. I'm talking about Lebanon, where the economy is increasingly driven by cash. We tell you more about this in the coming report.
He's Ahmed Rakdo, a resident of Beirut, who now runs a family-owned shop. Rakdo now manages a small business that once started as a hobby, but soon developed into his passion.
I started collecting banknotes and coins as a hobby. I used to visit my father, and you know, hobbies come with a love of curiosity and discovery, and so it became a passion of mine. I loved it. I researched it and I got attached to it.
Among the many souvenirs he keeps are Lebanon's old banknotes and coins. Rakdo is passionate about all currencies, but lira holds a special place in his heart.
This is our lira that used to have glory. The lira that has Baalbek ruins picture on it. This had its glory. Is a collection for memory. We put it in envelopes to sell it as a souvenir from Lebanon.
Apart from the old coins, Ragdo has started collecting the latest ones as well. They are still in circulation, but have unfortunately lost their value. He does not offer those for sale, but rather add them to update his wide collection of old currencies.
This is the 500 Lebanese lira, which has no value anymore. And this is the 250 Lebanese lira. It also has no value anymore. We are collecting them for memory, for collections. It is like the times of the old perforated Lebanese coins.
Lebanon is facing an unprecedented economic crisis. The World Bank has dubbed it as one of the deepest depressions of modern history. In the last 4 years, the local currency lost more than 98% of its value against the US dollar. It was an effect of decades of profligate spending, and alleged corruption brought an economic meltdown.
Will the value of lira go back to what it used to be? I don't know. But I believe for me and maybe for other people, its value is more of moral value than a financial value. And people should cling to it more. Our value is in our lira.
The lira's plunge has driven price hikes in the country. The cost of fuel, food and even groceries have shot up. Supermarkets have started pricing their products in dollars, and many private employers pay salaries in cash. The Lebanese have lost their trust in the currency. The World Bank says that nearly half of the country's economy has turned cash-based, as people lose their faith in the banking system. This has slashed hopes of economic recovery for the West Asian country. The World Bank estimated Lebanon's cash economy to be at around $9.9 billion, which is about 45.7% of its GDP last year. Banks, on the other hand, have imposed draconian restrictions on account holders. There is a limit on withdrawing cash, which has essentially locked depositors out of their life savings. This has prompted them to back away from a collapsing banking sector. On top of fiscal chaos, Lebanon has been marred by political crisis. The country is leaderless for around a year now. There is only a caretaker government operating as the deadlock continues between rival factions. Despite the grave conditions, Lebanon's political elite have failed to take action. They are the ones to be blamed for the hardships of thousands of people, the ones who have conveniently shrugged off responsibility.
After talking about Turkey, Iran, the GCC and Syria, there's a big part of West Asia, Mesopotamia, that we need to talk about. Iraq, after more than a decade of war, a country that was left out without political action, terrorism, occupation and all kinds of problems. It seems like good news is on the way to Iraq. Baghdad, the capital, is having a much needed makeover. Listen in.
Diggers and bulldozers have replaced the feared site of ammunition for this Baghdad neighborhood. Marred by years of war and neglect, it is now looking towards a makeover as roads get ripped to make way for new water and sewage systems. Similar scenes have played out across the city, the result of a push by the Prime Minister Mohammad Shia al-Sudani's new government to improve basic services for citizens. On the list are improvements to roads, bridges and sidewalks, as well as removing some security checkpoints that held up traffic.
All the previous prime ministers did not pay attention to the suffering of these poor people. I now consider this a revolution of reforms in several fields, not only in this region but in several areas, in terms of services, tiling, water and sewage. Those are the least of needs of the poor people.
government also aims to clean up the facades of buildings and revamp parks and promenades along the Tigris River. The main one is Abu Nawas Park. It is one of Baghdad's biggest green spaces.
It is a very beautiful and wonderful reconstruction campaign. The people of Baghdad have been waiting for this for a long time. To have parks in such beautiful places where people can breathe, because Baghdad has become filled with concrete buildings with very few green areas.
It is the main project to break ground during Sudani's tenure. Fitted with dedicated running and cycling lanes, benches and public bathrooms, it has received throngs of visitors since partially opening earlier this year. But impediments still remain. Though the park is bringing in throngs of visitors, the river itself is full of sewage and trash.
We are also working on developing the infrastructure of the capital Baghdad by initiating the implementation of important projects in the water and sanitation sectors, as well as working on waste management file and exploring how we can exploit it in electricity production.
The Baghdad mayor says the current works were only the beginning. Iraqis say they feel positive about the future due to the infrastructure improvements and recent stability. They say these are the most significant changes they have seen since the invasion, but feel a lot more can be done if the funds from selling oil do not get choked by corrupt pipelines.
That's all for this week and this edition of the West Asia Post. I'm Ghadi Francis, coming to you from Lebanon. For more about the West Asia, the region and all the developments, keep on watching WION World is One.